All right, guys, and we are back. And with us right now is former quarterback from Ohio State, Greg Frey. Greg, thank you so much for joining the OHIO podcast tonight.
You're welcome, guys. Happy to be on.
We got so many things. I've got so many things I want to talk to you about, and obviously we have all of our people who are watching and listening right now live on Facebook and YouTube, and we want to encourage all of you to put your questions for Greg down in the comment section. We will have a time to make sure we share those with Greg. But Greg, I want to start here right now. Let's go back to when you were in high school. You were a big-time high school recruit. How did you end up at Ohio State? I love these questions for every person I ever talked to who played for Ohio State to get their recruiting story.
Boy, that's crazy. The irony is I was just on a conference call today to learn about the recruiting process now for my son, who's a freshman, young quarterback. And because the recruiting game is so different than it was when I played, I had an old school coach, Steve Rasso, at St. Xavier High School, who opted to wait until the end of your senior year to give you all your letters and information from schools. So I didn't know. I knew I was a decent prospect. I knew I was having a really good senior year. I knew I played well as a sophomore, junior, but until then, I really wasn't sure. And I got a big box of stuff at the end of my senior year. And at that point, it wasn't too late in the game because it was different then, right? So, but I had probably, let's call it 90 days or less to do my visits, talk to coaches, go through the whole process, and make a decision. So when it came to Ohio State, they were very late to the game. And I don't quite remember all the detail, but there was a coaching change at the quarterback position. And I know Jim Tressel was the coach, the quarterback coach, just prior to when I got recruited. He left. I think he went to Syracuse, I believe. So there was a gap in having a quarterback coach and or whoever was recruiting Cincinnati. And I wasn't on the radar. So I was looking at Boston College, a handful of others, Iowa, San Diego State. And I remember I asked my dad, I said, hey, I'd like to at least know if Ohio State has some interest. So, he called it, he got the phone. My dad was very much he knew what to do. He called a local Ohio State alumnus. And within 24 hours, we had contact. So then it was pretty fast. And this might have been early January, which is crazy. Like, signing day was early February, early January. And immediately Coach Bruce got involved. Tom Lichtenberg, who then was hired as the quarterback coach. Two men who were great men in my lives. Both have passed on, were phenomenal coaches. And, frankly, I wasn't a huge Ohio State fan at the time. In Cincinnati, I always joke, Notre Dame was on the front page. Kentucky basketball was on the front page of the Cincinnati Enquirer. And Ohio State scores were on D14, literally. It was not on my radar. I was not an Ohio State fan. I was a big Notre Dame fan, growing up a Catholic town, et cetera. So point is that Ohio State got involved then, and Earl Bruce, he sold me. I loved Earl. And my goal was to play baseball and football, which was, a little bit unique. And I was very firm with that. And he gave me the go ahead to do that. And at the end of the day, in the course of that month or so, I had a great visit, and just there's something about Earl that just really intrigued me. And I was attracted to playing there. And ultimately, being close to home for my parents was huge. They were able to watch me. It turned out they were able to watch me play. And at the end of the day, when I made my decision, being close to home, proximity was huge. Earl Bruce was huge. And there's a big backstory. And God bless Earl. If he was here, he would tell you the story, because I got to share this, because my mom was a staunch Catholic. I went to a Catholic grade school, Catholic, I went to St. Xavier High School, right? Boston College was recruiting me. So in my mom's eyes, there's no decision. You're going to Boston College. That's just where you're going to go. Although she said to me, hey, it's your decision. Whatever you do was fine. Well, when I made the decision to go to Ohio State, she didn't speak to me for 3 days. And Earl talks about, he said in late January, he called me up, wanted to talk to me. He says, but really, I want to talk to your mom. And he goes, your mom answered. And he goes, because I didn't get her, but I got close. And he was so proud of that moment. He would tell me years later, and I decided to laugh, because I didn't know what that happened at the time. So anyway, there's your story. That's how I ended up at Ohio State.
That is beautiful. So my best friend is Carl Hugler, who worked. He was a student trainer under Earl Bruce. I think his last year might have been right before you got there,
Okay.
and because I think '82 was kind of when he was with the football team. But anyways, he loves Earl, and he and I actually got to meet Earl. I think it was the week after he dotted the I,
Oh, wow.
the shoe. So this is going to be for Carl. Talk
Okay.
just a few minutes about Earl Bruce, the man, and what you loved about him.
I don't know if a few minutes can cover it. I mean, Earl is, I get emotional about this because Earl is one of the top mentors in my life and the things that he taught me. Um, he was very difficult on me my first 2 years. My goal was to survive practice without an ass chewing, and it didn't happen. Not once, literally. So he had this kind of good cop, bad cop thing. He was the bad cop, and his recruiting coordinator, Bob McNay, was the good cop. So Earl would just undress me every single practice. And as a young quarterback, I figured it out later. Like that was the goal. Like if I could survive practice with him, then I could play on Saturdays. But if you couldn't survive him and his heat, no chance. So Bob McNay would go to dinner with me, and he would sit with me invariably once or twice a week, and he'd be patting me on the shoulder. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna be fine. And I'm like, man, I can't do anything right. Like, I mean, it's like every day, and they knew what was going on. But I realized after the fact that he did prepare me because the first time I got in the field, I realized like, and I'm sure guys that play for Woody probably felt the same way. Like you're looking around, like, oh, he's over there. He can't come out here like this. I'm good, right? And it's a weird psychology, but it worked. I will say that Earl taught me so much, and I had this conversation recently with a former Buckeye, and I'll just say that when he got fired, it was one of the greatest lessons I've ever been taught. It was the week of the Michigan game, and I'm sure a lot of people know the story, right? He gets fired on Monday. We play Michigan on Saturday. Earl addressed the team on Monday, and I'll never forget it. You could hear a pin drop, and he was so emotional. And he became so unselfish in the fact that he said, look, our job as coaches, my job is to coach you guys Saturday in Ann Arbor, and our job is to prepare you to go up there and win. And he goes, that's what we're going to do. I'll take all the rest of the stuff that's on me, all the media, all that other BS. Now, I can't paraphrase, but mix in a couple of F-bombs and you kind of get the mix, right? Red
Sure.
face, pounding his fist. And you talk about a group that was locked in. It was incredible. And, years after he leaves, he goes to Northern Iowa, Colorado State. And years after, I was able to spend 8 years with him doing radio for WTVN. And I really got to really, really know Earl outside of coaching as a person more. And, I got the full story of why he was let go, et cetera, et cetera. But I just had so much respect for him because he wasn't bitter. And the ability for him to forgive what happened to him was amazing. Now, there might have been one or two people he didn't forgive, but he did. I won't mention his names because, figure that out. But he still loved the Ohio State University, and he still loved Columbus, and he was so much of a part of that. And I just, there's so many lessons in that week that I'll never forget. And I'm just grateful that I had that opportunity to be there and experience that with him.
My childhood was, I grew up with my dad listening to 610 WTBN on the radio and hearing him and me as a young Buckeye not really knowing, that's the former coach, but his passion that would just come across, man. So you were the starting quarterback in a coaching transition.
Yes.
You can speak to that a little bit. What is that like? And as a leader and as a captain, what was going through your mind, the emotion, the mental, kind of hurdles you're having to go over to go from someone who recruited you, who you looked up to as a mentor, to now you have a brand new coach, new philosophy, all of that.
This is a whole other podcast, probably, Eric. Like I don't know if I can shrink that one down. It's very challenging. I'll say that. I went through the process of thinking, okay, am I going to transfer? What am I going to do? What type of offense are they going to run? And at the time you transfer, you got to sit out a year. So I called up Boston College because I had a great relationship with them. I was very much considering transferring. Now who knows what I would do? Different story. But the point is that I chose to stay. I talked to Jim Coletta, who was our new offense coordinator at the time. I liked his offense. I liked the style of the offense. That was enough for me to stick around and stay. The reality was that the downside is that you get a new staff coming in. It's like a political regime. It's like going blue to red, or vice versa, right? And I was not of the color of the new staff, and nor was anybody else that was staying. And you can look back in the newspapers and the media. That coaching staff came in and said, "Well, you're not our guys. We can't trade you." I mean, that's what they said to us. And maybe some staff still do that. I haven't seen anyone's recently do it, but that's not a pleasant feeling when they tell you right from the get-go, you're not our guys. And they also said, we want an athletic quarterback that can run the option, blah, 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 blah. Basically saying, well, you're not our guy. So it was, from the get-go, it was not pleasant. So I had to grow up a lot. And I'll just say that I knew that I could be the guy. And I was very determined to prove that. And in the course of being a 3-year starter, they made every effort to unseat me, and I made every effort to not give them a reason to. So I think my statistics speak for themselves amidst all that. And I was not a fan of that coaching staff at all at the time. They treated me like an absolute dog poop. I'd like to say another word, but they did. And the reality is, I guess, years later, John Cooper apologized to me at a Ohio State alumni event in Mansfield in front of probably 500 people, saying that they didn't use me to meet my talents as best as he thought they should years after, which I about fell over when he said it to me. And it is what it is. So I made the best of a really difficult situation, and I'm very proud that I stuck it out. But I'm gonna tell you, it wasn't easy for sure.
Well, I'm super glad you stuck it out, and I'm going to share why in just a second, but I have to share this comment with you. He was actually listening. My buddy Carl, he says, Greg, thanks for sharing stories about Earl Bruce. I was very blessed to work with Coach Bruce. God bless you, Greg. Praying hands, go Bucks. So
awesome. Thank you, Carl.
There you go. So very nice. Okay, so I posted a quick YouTube video on our social media sites yesterday of a game that I remember from my childhood. You probably know where I'm going. I was, I think I was 8 years old, and you guys traveled to Minneapolis, played in the old, was it the Metrodome?
Metrodome.
Yeah. And
the Hubert H. Humphrey Metrodome.
Yes.
I remember this game because I remember my dad being so upset at what was going on, but it was one of the greatest comebacks in Ohio State history, if not the greatest comeback in Ohio State history. And I believe at the time, wasn't it the greatest comeback in college football history?
It was tied for second.
Okay.
It's still like top 7 or 8. I think there's 2 teams that have come back with more than 31 points.
Okay.
Then you get down to a lot of teams that, not a lot, but let's say there's 6 or so that have done 31 points, but it's a matter of how long it took them to do it.
Yeah. So you guys fell behind 31-0. You do get that touchdown and I believe a 2-point conversion before you go into halftime. Right. Here's my question. What happened at halftime in that locker room? And because when you guys came out, it was like a different football team, and it is still to this day, I get goosebumps from it, man. It is awesome.
Right. So again, this is one this is one of those days I remember vividly. And the first thing I'll tell you, Eric, is that I had to make a decision on the sideline, because you're human in that situation, and when things don't go your way, you have that fight or flight or freeze emotion. And it was very heavy with me. We turned it over like 5 times in the first half. And I remember vividly, I made myself stare at that scoreboard when it was 31-0. And I was beat up pretty good in the first half. It was a physical first half. I got hit a bunch.
You were getting annihilated, man.
Yeah, and including a smelling salt, the whole deal, right? So, and I was holding the towel. And I just remember, like, I'm kneeling and I'm staring at the scoreboard. And I made myself stare at it and just accept where we were and choose to not quit. And it was that simple, it's not my nature to quit, but again, with the environment that we're in, it's like, your brain starts going, well, maybe it's not our day. Let's just play out the string, get on the bus, and get the heck out of here, because it's not going to happen. But I credit my dad on that one. Like, I couldn't do it. I had to keep fighting. So the goal was, let's just score before halftime. right? Let's just do that. You start to get these little goals, right? And we did, and we went for 2, and we got it. So it's 31-8. And I got to tell you, 31-8, you're down 23 points, sounds really attractive after you were down 31. So the halftime was, I just remember the offensive guys went in our room, defensive guys went in theirs, coaches go meet for a while. So we had, let's call it 8 or 10 minutes as just us. And that's where the leaders show up, right? That's where the guys, the upperclassmen, the linemen were talking. And I just got sales pitch mode. I'm like, guys, look, first of all, this is Minnesota. And all due respect to Minnesota, we hadn't lost to them. We knew we could beat them. And the problems were on us. We turned it over 5 times. We gave them 4 of those scores. Flat out gave them to them. And credit them for scoring. But it was like, look, guys, if we stop turning the ball over, we can move the ball on these guys. And we felt like we had the best offense in the Big Ten, which I think by year's end we did. We knew we could throw it. We knew we could run it. So it was a matter of let's just get out of our own way. Let's go do what we do. And let's see if we can chip away at this thing. And we didn't talk about winning. We talked about chipping away. Because we knew we got the ball first in the second half. And again, that last drive before the half gave us some confidence. So, the coaches came in and we made a few adjustments. But, I can't tell you what the coaches said. Some people like, what did Coach Cooper say? I don't know. He wasn't in our room. So I'm not going to give him any credit. I'm just not. And I love John. I do. John and I have mended our ways. But at the time, we're just get out of the offensive room because he was not involved with the offense. And if he stuck his nose in, we're like, get out, literally. So offensively, though, we knew we could do. I guess the wiser I get, the more I just speak directly on this, Eric. Sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. I got it. So, Chris, get ready with a question. I'm going to ask this one. This comes from one of our listeners right now. This is from Greg Olberding. He says, Greg, was the Minnesota game your number one memory as a Buckeye, or do you have another one that's your number one memory?
I have a few. Obviously that's a big one. It's what a lot of people remember. My first, I kind of was known for the comebacks. So my first one was LSU in '88, and that was a dream come true for me because it was, I threw a touchdown pass to win the game against, LSU at the time. They were 5th ranked in Ohio Stadium. It was very emotional for me. Iowa, my senior year, we were at Iowa and we had to win to stay in the Big Ten race. They were undefeated at the time, and they ended up playing the Rose Bowl. They were a great football team. And we stole one from them in literally the last second. That's another. I'd say those 3 are my top 3. And there's a few other ones, but those 3 stand out because they were comebacks. And I say 3, Minnesota.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, so Greg, recently there's been a huge amount of former players who have come back into the coaching ranks. Now, I understand you coached from 2004 to 2008, roughly, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Have you had any thoughts of returning to coaching at all?
Yes, and I am. So I jumped back in last fall. My son is now, he just finished up his freshman year at Bexley. So I've watched other high school coaches in my broadcast days, my broadcast duties as a high school analyst. I've watched some friends coach their sons, and I'm like, I want to do that. So, I've been timing it up. So I was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach last year at Bexley. So, yes.
Okay. Any thoughts of possibly moving on to the college ranks again?
None.
Okay.
0. I want a life. No thanks.
Yeah.
There it is. There's the truth bomb. I knew. Absolutely.
I researched that 20 years ago. I'm like, no. And I remember I talked to a couple of Ohio State coaches that I know well, and they're like, why are you talking to us? You got a life. Don't do it. Okay.
As a former player, what are your thoughts about the college changes? With NIL and the transfer portal and things, it's a whole different world, isn't it?
It is. And I just went to the Ohio State coaches, Ohio State high school coaches football clinic this past week, which was at the Hilton Easton. And a lot of the presenters were college coaches. So you see a lot of the college coaches come in there and you have those conversations. And they spoke, a lot of them spoke very openly about how difficult that is with NIL and the portal. And I talked to the new UC coach, I think it's Satterwhite, who came from Louisville. He says, I've been on the job 60 days, and he spent 2 days with his team. And I was like, it was eye opening. Like, are you kidding me? He's like, 2 days because of all the other stuff that's going on, right? Luke Fickell spoke about he's not a big fan of the portal, yet they have signed 13 kids out of the portal. And at Wisconsin, they've signed like they haven't taken transfers. They're rarely taking transfer. But this year, just given this situation, they had, of course, guys left when he came in. So it's kind of one of those you have to adopt to the existing circumstances. And some coaches use the portal more than others. But they talked about the challenges of it's difficult to really work with a player for 4 or 5 years now, because if you treat them badly, they're just going to leave, right? If you're not nice to them, they're going to leave. So it's really a delicate situation from a coaching standpoint, and I can't imagine how challenging that is.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, go ahead. You got another one?
Yeah. So Greg, we've talked about your favorite moments. Is there a moment that you wish you could have a redo on from back in your playing days?
Oof.
Just that one pass that maybe you wish you didn't throw. One time that you wish you had just played something a little different.
No, I don't really live that, and I don't look at things like that. But I will tell you that people ask me that all the time. What happened on that play? Well, I'm like, didn't work. There's probably I would tell you there's a couple plays where I threw good passes that weren't caught in certain critical situations that I tend to I have a hard time forgiving certain people for not catching those balls. But I'm a forgiving person. But I say that jokingly, like, those are the kind you're like, if that guy just would have caught that pass, and I've had my mistakes too, but I move on from mine. Like I'm down the field.
So, and you kind of touched on it there. You had some really good receivers. You played Jeff Graham, Bobby Olive, Bryant Stabline, who was always one of my favorites. You had some great running backs. Who was your favorite go-to target, Greg?
Ooh.
If you had a 3rd and 6 and you had to get the first down, who are you going to?
I go back to my last 2 years, and the guys that you mentioned were all guys I could rely on. And if Bobby Olive was sitting here and Jeff Graham was sitting here, I either one. I mean, I didn't have a favorite because I could trust those guys. Ultimately, as a quarterback, you got to trust, and those guys I could trust. Brian Stabline, I could absolutely trust. Bernard Edwards was a big one for us. He was our slot guy. I could trust Bernard. So all those guys. I mean, I truly didn't get wrapped up in that. I knew that those guys were capable, so it was a matter of making the right reads and just delivering football. And over time, those guys all made plays.
So you've seen the recent crop of receivers that Ohio State has put out. Just amazing, amazing guys. Is there one of these guys that you just say, gosh, I wish I could have had this guy?
No, but I think the point, and we talk about the quarterback race coming up here. I'm going to say the same thing I said 2 years ago when C.J. Stroud won the job. I said, whoever wins the job is going to light it up because they've got a great coach. They've got a great staff. They got a great offense. I mean, I feel like I can still throw the ball a little bit. I'm like, I could probably throw for 3,000 yards in that offense. I mean, as long as I didn't get hit, because those guys they're open and you got time to throw. A lot of those throws aren't too hard.
And as a former quarterback and a coach, Greg, the next starting quarterback will be?
We're not there yet. We don't know. It's the guy that wins the job. And you know what, Chris? Here's your answer. They don't know yet.
Right.
They don't know. I would tell you the guys in the room have a pretty good feel because if you're in the room every day and you're practice every day, those guys know.
Yeah.
But we're 15 practices away from having a better feel for that, and it's it'll take care of itself. I know that it always does.
On that note, Greg, I gotta get your take on Ryan Day and his offense.
Mm-hmm.
As a former quarterback, what do you think, man?
It's kind of hard to argue with what they do. I think, geez, if you look at their production the last couple of years, it's insane what they do. The only thing I would say, and I don't want to say it's a critique, and again, I'm an offensive coordinator, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were 1-8 last year. So if anybody could nitpick me and say that guy sucks, he's not any good, right? Because we weren't. So I understand what it's like to sit in that chair. So Ryan does a lot of good things, but every coordinator kind of has their way of doing things. I'll say this. I feel like you need to have a quarterback that's a little bit more mobile. C.J. Stroud was mobile, But either they didn't ask him to run it more, or they told him not to. I don't know which one it was because I'm not in the room every day. I don't know, but I feel like in crunch time, you look at the last couple games, right? Like Michigan game, he wasn't running the ball very much, and boy, there was opportunities. Now they got the message because against Georgia, he ran it more, and it's like,
Right.
whoa! Like my point is this: as a coordinator, when you've got a mobile quarterback, and I made some notes here. I'll take a JT Barrett all day long over a great thrower. He was a pretty good thrower, but a really good runner. Now I wouldn't run him. Urban ran him a little, in my opinion, too much. Sometimes 18, 20 times a game, like a running back. I don't want a quarterback taking that much pounding. But if you run a quarterback, let's say 5 to 7 times a game by design, and he's going to run for a couple first downs when he knows he can, that puts tremendous pressure on a defense. Now again, if Ryan would sit here and say, well, we don't need to because we got all these receivers and we got these backs. Okay, I agree. But I also feel like I would say, okay, well, look at Georgia the last couple of years. They don't have the best thrower in the nation. He's a pretty good thrower, but, man, he can run. And when he's got to go run for first down and be mobile, he did it, and it worked. So it doesn't mean I'm right, but I would like to see a guy that can certainly throw it but has the ability to go run for first down when needed. Or, if you're going to run the zone read, which they do, and a lot of variation of that, have a guy that can get a little bit out of it that you're going to run a few times. Because if you run him a couple times, it changes the way defense has to defend you because they have to respect the quarterback. And as a coordinator, I feel like you got 12 guys in the field when your quarterback can run. That's what I feel like.
Greg, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about maybe a little bit of your story about concussions and how you as a father and as a football coach feel about this trend that we are on to try to get the head out of the play, especially tackling from a defensive side, and how maybe positive you think that is as someone who has dealt with concussions, and maybe you can combine this answer with how you feel Ryan Day and his dear wife have tackled mental illness amongst youth today. I think that not that they're combined, but they kind of can be connected a little bit.
Well, those are two great. There are two great questions there. I think they're very different.
Yeah.
Number one, I think it's great what they're doing, advocating for mental health. Obviously, Ryan's got a background having dealt with that with his father, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I did a podcast about a year ago with some dear friends who lost a daughter to suicide. So I didn't know her, but I know what happened. And, that's just but it comes down to taking care of mental health. So I believe I love it that they're advocating for that. How about that?
Yeah.
On the other side, as far as concussions, again, that could be a whole show. But I will say this, that I'm a guy, you're looking at a guy that's had 12 plus concussions. I've had one very serious outside of football that led to probably 5 or 6 years of side effects that were very real. But I've learned a lot about the healing of the brain and neuroplasticity, et cetera, et cetera. And I've learned that you can heal. So I've lived it. I've had concussions in sports. I had a couple in football. I think if I said to people, I had 12 concussions, the assumption would be, well, those were in football, and that's not the case. I will say that there's a lot of negative media towards concussions, too much in a sense. The narrative is that football, because I hear this from moms all the time. I'm holding my kid out of football because there's too many concussions. Well, and I say, well, stop reading the news because it's not all true. Yes, there's concussions in football, but they happen in other sports too. And it's not as bad as you might think that it is. And yes, the helmet safety is getting better. Tackling is getting better as far as where to put the helmet. It's a physical sport. The injuries are going to happen, right? But you know what? They happen in basketball. They're not wearing helmets, right? They happen in lacrosse, they happen in soccer, et cetera, et cetera. So, I'm going to defend football very, very firmly in that one because there's this narrative out there that it's just the worst thing for young kids, and I totally disagree because there's so many positives to football from a team building standpoint, et cetera, and learning how to deal with adversity, learning how to deal with success. And again, I have a child that's going through that right now, and He took a couple shots last year. I can tell you that. He had a first game of the year. There was a blatant targeting on him, and it was vicious right in front of me. And I'm coaching, plus I'm dad, and I'm like, woof. And the ref standing right next to me didn't call it. And I tend to be a little intense, and I wanted to wring that guy's neck, and I chose not to. And when I watched it on film, it was worse on film. You know what? I give him credit. My son bounced up, went back to the huddle, and on we went, right? So that stuff, you're going to have collisions. It's a collision sport. But I would say that it's improved. Now, in the NFL, I just saw stats in the NFL. Their concussion number went up. Again, you can argue that one because it's so conservative now that if a guy's, if he's looking at the doctor funny, he's out. Like, he's out.
Right.
You could argue, again, we go down a rabbit hole on this one. You can look at the Dolphins, and with Tua, he had a bunch of them this year and a couple times played longer than he should have, and it wasn't diagnosed properly. But that's a hard one because I've been on the sideline with guys that, I'm thinking, man, I think he's concussed. And I've had discussions with doctors or trainers like, I've told a trainer he's concussed, get him out. And the trainer's like, no, he's good. And I was right at the time. But I've seen the opposite of that. Coaches tend to argue for, hey, I want my kid to play. I don't want him out, right? Let's take the risk, right? And every coach is coached knows that feeling. I want my guy to play. I got to have my guy, right? So I guess to wrap it up, it's a delicate subject. But I would say that I'm not completely buying into the narrative that's the worst thing or it's as bad as the narrative says it is. I don't buy that. There's a lot of untruths there. And if you talk to a lot of orthopedic surgeons, they'll tell you, well, the other sports are just dangerous. Concussions are going to happen. So to the moms out there that listen, I'm saying, it's not what you're reading. Yes, there can be concussions, but it's not that bad. It's just not. There's too many other positives in football that I advocate. And again, I'm speaking from a standpoint of I had 12, been there, done that. I'm still here, and I bounced back, and I have a child that's playing, so I feel pretty good about that.
It's 9:00, guys. We're going to have to wrap this up, but I got to ask my famous question, Greg. I ask this to every interview I give. To you, Greg Frey, what does it mean to be a Buckeye?
Oof. Well, that's a great one. It's special for me because, I played in Ohio Stadium, which is just, I'm so grateful that I had that opportunity. And it's still special to go back and be part of that. To hear Carmen, Ohio just makes my hair stand up. To be able to go to practice, it makes me very, very proud that I know that I was part of that. I also, I loved my academic participation in Ohio State. I had great teachers. I had a tremendous academic experience. So, it's not just football for me. I also had 2 years of playing baseball at Ohio State and won a Big Ten championship. And, 1991, I think our team still holds the record of the most wins in Ohio State history. Won a Big Ten tournament, et cetera. So it's deep for me, from my personal experience and then my years afterwards, to all the coaches that have kept an open door policy for former players, which has been a great thing that I can go back and still feel like I'm a part of that. That's the groundwork that my guys laid down, with me was important. So, there we go.
There it is, guys. Greg Frey, thank you so much for coming on and being part of the OHIO podcast. I have enjoyed this interview thoroughly, my man. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm going to enjoy following you and your son's recruitment. I'm really big into recruiting, so
All right.
looking forward to that. Maybe we can catch a game with Bexley this year. That'd be a lot of fun. To all of you who are watching, thanks for tuning in and being a part of this live show. As always, you can go to our YouTube channel. You'll be able to watch this recording. We'll also break this down and record this a few days later of just this section of the interview with former Buckeye quarterback Greg Frey. Greg, thanks again so much. We really appreciate that. To all of you out there, be kind to one another. I owe someone's OH and sing Carmen, Ohio with all your heart. And until next time, OH!
I-O!
Oh, thanks, Eric. Thanks, Chris.
Go Bucks.
Thanks, Greg.